predator becomes prey in the Florida Everglades as hundreds of hunters descend on the Sunshine State to catch and kill as many Burmese pythons as possible.
Florida just lost the war for the Everglades, and most people don't even know it happened. For 20 years, the state threw everything at the Burmese python invasion. Bounty hunters, trained dogs, and millions of tax dollars. Nothing worked. The snakes kept winning. But then scientists tried something desperate. They deployed a fleet of $4,000 robotic rabbits into the swamps.
Florida is deploying robotic rabbits to help capture invasive Burmese pythons in the Everglades.
It sounded like a joke at first, but the data these machines sent back didn't just reveal where the snakes were hiding. It revealed a terrifying secret about how the enemy operates. And trust me, you are not ready for what they found. The perfect predator versus the fragile swamp. In the heart of the Everglades, there is a sound that is missing. If you visited this massive river of grass 30 years ago, the noise would have been deafening. You would hear the splash of marsh rabbits diving into the water. You would hear the chittering of squirrels, the rustle of raccoons, and the heavy steps of bobcats stalking through the brush. It was a chaotic, noisy symphony of life. But today, in vast stretches of this 1.5 million acre wilderness, there is only the wind and the sawgrass. The silence is heavy. It feels wrong. And it is not because the animals left, it is because they were eaten. The statistics are terrifying, but numbers on a page don't tell the whole story. Biologists estimate that in some specific areas of Everglades National Park, 99% of raccoons constitute a total loss. That is effectively extinction in that local area. Marsh rabbits, which used to be everywhere, have completely vanished from the core of the park. Foxes are gone. Even the white-tailed deer, a sturdy and fast animal, has seen its population drop by over 90%. The food web hasn't just been disrupted, it has been decapitated. So, here is the deal. The Burmese python is not just a snake. It is an eating machine that evolution spent millions of years perfecting. In its native home of Southeast Asia, it has natural enemies. It has diseases and tigers and other predators that keep its numbers in check. But in Florida, it is an apex predator with zero competition. It is like dropping a lion into a petting zoo. The native animals here, the possums, the birds, the gentle marsh rabbits, never evolved to recognize a giant constrictor as a threat. They don't know to run until it is already too late. The origin story of how we got here is still debated, but the consequences are undeniable. Some say it started with the exotic pet trade, with overwhelmed owners releasing snakes they couldn't feed. Others point to Hurricane Andrew in 1992, which destroyed a breeding facility and unleashed hundreds of baby pythons into the storm-flooded swamps. Whatever the cause, the result is a population explosion that defies logic. We are talking about estimates ranging from 100,000 to 300,000 snakes. But honestly, no one knows for sure, and that is the scariest part. These snakes are masters of stealth. A 12-foot python can hide in grass that is only a few inches tall. Their skin, marked with irregular brown and tan blotches, mimics the play of light and shadow on the forest floor perfectly. They can stay motionless for weeks, slowing their metabolism down to a crawl, just waiting for a heat signature to pass by. When they strike, they move faster than the human eye can track. They bite, they coil, and they squeeze. It is lights out in seconds. But it gets worse. The python isn't just eating the small stuff. We have found pythons with full-grown deer in their stomachs. We have seen them battling and eating 6-foot alligators. This is an invasive species that is literally eating the natives out of house and home. And because they are semi-aquatic, they can travel through the thousands of miles of canals and waterways that crisscross South Florida. They are everywhere, and yet they are nowhere to be seen. The impact ripples upwards. The Florida panther, one of the most endangered cats on Earth, is starving. With no deer or hogs to eat, the panthers are getting weaker, making it harder for them to survive and reproduce. The birds of prey, hawks and eagles, are seeing their food sources vanish too. The entire ecosystem is unraveling. It is a slow-motion collapse that scientists are watching with absolute horror. For years, the state tried to handle this the old-fashioned way. They hired guys with trucks and snake hooks. They set up bounties. They told the public, if you see one, take it out. But the Everglades is a hostile place for humans. It is hot, humid, full of bugs, and nearly impenetrable. Trying to find a snake in millions of acres of swamp is worse than finding a needle in a haystack. The realization hit the scientific community hard around 2015. They looked at the data, looked at the breeding rates, and realized that human hunters were not even making a dent. For every snake a hunter pulled out of the swamp, a female python was laying a clutch of 50 to 100 eggs somewhere deep in the mangroves. The math just didn't work. We were losing by a landslide. This desperation is what drove the state to consider wilder options. They needed something that could go where humans couldn't. They needed eyes that didn't get tired and sensors that didn't get distracted by the heat. The situation required a radical shift in strategy. If you can't beat the predator with brute force, you have to outsmart it. You have to use its own biology against it. But as they were about to find out, playing games with nature usually comes with a heavy price. But the swamp has a way of punishing anyone who brings a machine to a monster fight. A trap made of wires and fur. Before we get to the robots, you have to understand why the humans failed so miserably. It wasn't for a lack of trying. The Python Challenge became a massive event. People came from all over the country, strapped with GoPros and optimism, thinking they were going to save the Everglades. But the reality of the swamp breaks people. You are wading waist-deep in murky water, surrounded by razor-sharp sawgrass, with the sun beating down on you at 90 degrees. And the snakes? They are simply better at this than we are. A python can detect the vibration of your footsteps from 50 feet away. They can smell you coming. Most hunters would walk right past a 10-foot snake and never even know it was there. The detection rate for human hunters is abysmal, something like less than 1% effectiveness in random searches. So the experts tried dogs. Dogs have incredible noses, and yeah, in controlled tests, the dogs were great. They could sniff out a python in a box in a warehouse every single time. But release a dog into the actual Everglades? It is a nightmare. The heat exhaustion hits the dogs hard. The sawgrass cuts their paws. And then there is the biggest problem: alligators. You can't let a valuable detection dog run loose in a swamp full of gators. It is just too dangerous. The dogs had to be kept on leashes, which limited their range. The dog program, while a good idea on paper, just couldn't scale up to cover 1 million acres. That is when Dr. Robert McCleary from the University of Florida and his team decided to get creative. If they couldn't send a real animal into the bush to find the snakes, they would build a fake one. Enter the Robo-Rabbit. Now, this wasn't just a plush toy from a department store. This was a sophisticated piece of engineering. The concept was based on the idea of an evolutionary trap. They wanted to trigger the python's predatory instincts so hard that the snake couldn't resist revealing itself. Basically, they took the shell of a rabbit decoy and packed it with high-tech guts. The most important part was the heat signature. Pythons have heat-sensing pits along their jaws that allow them to see thermal images. A cold piece of plastic wouldn't interest them. So, the engineers installed heating elements inside the rabbit to maintain a steady body temperature of around 99 to 100 degrees Fahrenheit, exactly the temp of a living, breathing mammal. But heat wasn't enough. It had to smell real. They outfitted the robots with scent diffusers that released a synthetic rabbit pheromone. To a snake flickering its tongue in the air, this thing smelled like dinner. Then came the movement. The robots were rigged with servos and motors. They could twitch their noses. They could wiggle their ears. They were programmed to move in short, sporadic bursts, mimicking the nervous behavior of a prey animal foraging for food. And finally, the surveillance tech. These weren't just baits, they were spies. Each unit was equipped with cameras, motion sensors, and GPS trackers. They utilized solar panels on their backs to keep the batteries charged for long-term deployment. The idea was to create a network of these things, sentinels that never slept, never sweated, and never got tired. When a python attacked, the sensors would trigger, sending an alert and video footage directly to the researchers' computers. The price tag? about $4,000 per unit. It was a massive investment. Critics called it a waste of money. They said, "You're going to throw expensive electronics into a swamp? Good luck." But the team was desperate. They needed data. They needed to know where the snakes were moving and when they were hunting. They deployed about 120 of these units into the marshes. They placed them on levees near tree islands and along the edges of canals. The scientists sat back, monitoring their screens, waiting for the strikes. They expected to see pythons coiling around the robots. They expected to get clear IDs on the locations of the big breeders. It felt like the perfect plan. They had accounted for biology, technology, and location. But there is one thing you can never fully account for, and that is the chaotic nature of the Florida wild. The Everglades is a rough place for sensitive electronics, and it is also home to other predators that don't care if a rabbit is made of meat or metal. The scientists were watching the screens for snakes, but something else found the robots first. The swamp rejects the machines. The first few weeks of the deployment were, to put it mildly, a disaster. The reports started coming in, but they weren't the reports the team wanted. Unit 47, signal lost. Unit 12, catastrophic damage. Unit 89, GPS showing location in the middle of a deep canal. So, here is what happened. The engineers had built the perfect lure for a python, but in doing so, they had also built the perfect lure for everything else. The biggest problem was the American alligator. A gator doesn't rely as much on heat pits as a snake does, but it definitely responds to movement and splashes. The robo-rabbits would twitch their ears or wiggle on the bank and boom. A 10-foot gator would launch out of the water and crush the $4,000 robot in a single bite. The bite force of an alligator is immense, thousands of pounds per square inch. The plastic shells shattered. The circuitry was chewed up. The lithium batteries were punctured. In one instance, a researcher went to check on a unit that had gone offline and found nothing but scattered wires and a solar panel floating in the mud. Another time, they found a unit that had been dragged underwater, completely ruined by the liquid. The gators were treating the high-tech equipment like chew toys. Then came the weather. This is Florida. It rains a lot. And not just a drizzle. We are talking tropical downpours. Despite the waterproofing, moisture found a way in. Seals failed. Humidity corroded the delicate connections on the circuit boards. Solar panels got covered in algae and bird droppings, rendering them useless. And getting this, even the birds of prey got involved. Hawks and owls would swoop down, dig their talons into the synthetic fur, realize it wasn't meat, and then knock the unit over or damage the sensors. It looked like a total failure. The project was bleeding money. Out of the initial fleet, dozens were destroyed or incapacitated within the first month. The critics who said it was a waste of money were starting to look right. The team was frustrated. They were trying to solve a biological puzzle, but they were getting bogged down in engineering failures. To make matters worse, the pythons were actually harder to trick than the gators. Some video feeds showed snakes approaching the robots, flickering their tongues and then just turning away. It seemed like something was off. Maybe the motor noise was too loud. Maybe the heat distribution wasn't quite right. The snakes were skeptical. Morale was low. It felt like the Everglades had chewed up their best idea and spit it out. The robo-rabbit was becoming a joke. It seemed like just another failed attempt in a long line of failed attempts to save the wetlands. But this is where the story twists. In science, a failed experiment is still data. And while many robots were destroyed, the ones that survived, and even the ones that were attacked, were recording everything. The servers back at the university were filling up with terabytes of video, audio, and sensor logs. The researchers stopped looking at the robots as traps and started looking at them as data points. They began to analyze the times of day when interactions occurred. They looked at the specific locations where the robots were destroyed versus where they were ignored. They realized that even a destroyed robot gave them a coordinate. If a gator ate a robot at point A, that meant point A was a gator stronghold. But if a python inspected a robot at point B, even if it didn't attack, that was a confirmed sighting. The team brought in AI experts to sift through the noise. They fed all that messy, chaotic data into a machine learning algorithm. They wanted to find the needle in the haystack. They wanted to know if there was a pattern to the madness. Most people don't realize that AI is really good at finding connections that humans miss. A human looks at a map and sees a swamp. The AI looked at the timestamps, the humidity levels, the temperature logs, and the interaction data, and it saw something else entirely. It saw a structure. The robots didn't catch the snakes, but they did something much more dangerous. They doxed them. The massacre on the levees. The breakthrough didn't happen in the swamp. It happened on a computer screen in a lab. The AI model crunched the data from the surviving robots and the killed ones, and it generated a heat map. What the researchers saw blew their minds. They had always assumed pythons were random wanderers spreading out evenly across the marsh to hunt. But the map showed distinct glowing lines. The snakes weren't wandering aimlessly. They were commuting. The data revealed the existence of python highways. These were specific levees, tree lines, and canal banks that the snakes used repeatedly to travel long distances. The robots placed along these specific routes had 20 times more interactions than robots placed just 100 yards away. It turns out pythons are efficient. They don't want to fight through thick sawgrass if they don't have to. They prefer the path of least resistance. The AI identified corridors where the vegetation was slightly less dense, or where the elevation kept them just dry enough. This changed the entire game. The strategy shifted from search everywhere to ambush the highways. The state didn't need to cover 1.5 million acres anymore. They just needed to cover these specific coordinates. They deployed the professional hunters, the guys who know what they are doing, to these exact spots identified by the robot data. The results were insane. Hunters would go to a coordinate provided by the AI, and within an hour they would bag a snake. Then another. Then another. In some cases, they found mating balls, massive knots of snakes where one large female is surrounded by several males. One hunter reported clearing out 7 large pythons from a single stretch of levee in one night. That is unheard of. Before the data, getting 1 snake was a good night. Getting 7 was a miracle. The efficiency of the hunt skyrocketed. The cost per capture dropped. The robo-rabbits, despite being chewed on by gators and rained on, had provided the intelligence needed to launch a targeted strike. They discovered that the snakes were using the levees not just for travel, but for thermoregulation. The gravel and dirt on the levees held heat from the sun longer than the water did. The robots had picked up on this subtle temperature difference in how the snakes gravitated toward it. It was a massacre. The hunters were finally on the offense. They weren't just reacting to sightings, they were waiting at the bus stops, so to speak. The removal numbers for that season shattered records. We are talking about thousands of pounds of snake meat and skin removed from the ecosystem. The sheer size of some of these females was staggering, 17, 18 feet long, full of developing eggs. By targeting the highways, they were taking out the big breeders. Removing one 18-foot female is worth more than removing 50 baby snakes because you are preventing the next generation. The failed robot experiment became the most successful intelligence operation in the history of invasive species management. It proved that you don't need a robot to kill a snake, you just need the robot to tell you where the snake is. But as the body count rose, the biologists noticed something else. The snakes they were catching were different. They were finding snakes in areas that should have been too cold for them. They were finding snakes that were more aggressive than usual. The data was great, but it also hinted at a terrifying possibility. We were catching the ones that used the highways. But what about the ones that didn't? What about the snakes that were staying in the deep, deep sawgrass? We thought we had outsmarted them, but the survivors were already learning a new trick. Why the war is far from over. When humans declare war on a species, we assume we have the upper hand. We have technology, robots, thermal cameras, and satellite tracking. But when you apply massive pressure to a population, like hunting them relentlessly in specific areas, you inadvertently force them to evolve. This is basic Darwinism played out in real time. By catching all the snakes that were dumb enough to use the easy paths, the python highways, we might be making a catastrophic mistake. We are weeding out the weak. We are removing the ones that make mistakes. And what is left behind? The snakes that are smarter, more cautious, and completely unpredictable. There is a theory circulating among the experts, and frankly, it is keeping them up at night. It is called the super snake theory. For years, we thought we were dealing with standard Burmese pythons. These are jungle animals. They like heat, humidity, and stillness. But genetic studies have dropped a bombshell on the scientific community. Some of the pythons caught in the deep Everglades are not pure Burmese pythons. They are hybrids. They carry DNA from the Indian rock python. Why does that matter? Because the Indian rock python is a different beast entirely. While the Burmese python is generally lethargic and lazy, the Indian rock python is known for being meaner, faster, and more aggressive. But the scariest part? They are cold tolerant. Burmese pythons are tropical. A hard freeze in Florida should kill them. That was the government's big hope, that a freak winter storm would eventually wipe them out naturally. But the hybrid snakes, they can handle the cold. They can survive the freeze. The data from the Robot project showed that the population is drifting. They aren't just staying in the southern tip of Florida anymore. They are moving north. They have been spotted near Lake Okeechobee. There have been confirmed sightings as far north as Orlando. If these snakes adapt to colder weather through this genetic hybridization, there is nothing stopping them. The frost line was our shield. If that shield breaks, they could move into the bayous of Louisiana, the swamps of Georgia, and the riverlands of Alabama. The containment zone is failing right in front of our eyes, but it gets worse. Let's talk about intelligence. The fact that some snakes ignored the robo-rabbits suggests something terrifying. They can learn. Snakes are not supposed to be smart. They are supposed to be instinct-driven machines. But hunters are reporting a new behavior. They call it trap shyness. If a snake sees another snake get captured in a trap, or sees a snake attack a robot and get stunned, it remembers. A trap-shy population of apex predators is a nightmare scenario. It means our best tools stop working. It means the element of surprise is gone. There are even wilder theories gaining traction on the fringes of the research community. One of these is the saltwater adaptation theory. Pythons are freshwater animals. Saltwater usually dehydrates them and shuts down their organs. But recently, pythons have been spotted swimming in the open ocean, miles off the coast. They have been seen crossing between the Florida Keys. If these monsters figure out how to tolerate saltwater for long periods, the ocean is no longer a barrier. It becomes a highway. They could island hop all the way to the Caribbean, or move up the coast using the water to bypass our land-based checkpoints. Then there is the silent hunter theory. Old-school snake hunters used to find pythons by listening. A big snake moving through sawgrass makes a specific sound, a heavy, dragging noise. But lately the big ones are disappearing. They are becoming ghosts. Some researchers believe the snakes are adapting their movement patterns to be quieter, slower, and more deliberate to avoid detection by acoustic sensors. We are also seeing a disturbing shift in their diet. We know they eat deer and alligators, but there is a fear that as the swamp empties of small mammals, the snakes will turn toward urban environments. This is the concrete jungle theory. If the food in the Everglades runs out because they have eaten everything, they won't just starve. They will follow the scent of food. That scent leads to the suburbs. Backyard pets, stray cats, and garbage attract rats, which attract snakes. We are already seeing them in canals behind housing developments. If they adapt to living in storm drains and sewers, we are looking at an invasion that enters our own backyards. The Robo-Rabbit project was a win. Absolutely. It gave us a temporary advantage, but the pythons reproduce so fast, females laying up to 100 eggs a year, that we have to keep hitting them with new tactics constantly. It is a numbers game, and the math is not on our side. Some biologists are even whispering about pack behavior. Snakes are solitary. They don't work together. But there have been strange reports of multiple large females converging on a single area, almost as if they are coordinating to corner prey or overwhelm a territory. If they are developing any level of social behavior or coordinated hunting, the game is over. That is a level of sophistication we are not ready for. The outcome is insane because we realize the magnitude of the enemy. We aren't fighting a static group of animals. We are fighting a fluid, adapting, evolving wave of muscle and teeth. We are now looking at using drones with thermal cameras, genetic bioweapons that target only the snakes, and even more advanced robotics. But every time we make a move, the python seems to counter. We build a better trap. Nature builds a better snake. The Everglades will likely never be the same. The days of the marsh rabbit might be gone forever in some areas. We have moved from eradication to management. We aren't trying to kill them all anymore. We are just trying to keep the numbers low enough so that something else, anything else, can survive. The robotic rabbits proved that we can use technology to fight back, but they also proved that the enemy is vastly more numerous, more intelligent, and more entrenched than we ever imagined. So here is the controversial question. If the snakes are evolving faster than our technology, should we keep spending millions on robots, or should we just accept that Florida belongs to the python now? It is a terrifying thought. Let me know your take in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more wild stories. I'll see you in the next one.